Welcome to Creative Courage Chats, a search for a new understanding of creativity and problem solving. I'm Alex Raffy. Hi, everybody. Back to another Creative Courage Chats, where we like to talk about creativity and talk to creative people. And, creativity, my view is that creativity is problem solving. And, there's a lot of problems in the world. And I kind of think I'm talking to solutions here. The people I speak to are, in my opinion, solutions to problems through the discussion of creativity. So today I'm talking to Bernie Fratto. He's a Fox Sports radio host. Nationally known sports radio host. You've been doing this for a while, and you talk for a living, looks like. And so I'm kind of new at this with doing this podcast, so I'm excited to talk to you and learn a little bit about what you do and how you do it. You want to give everybody a little bit of a background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am with Fox Sports Radio. I host a show every Saturday night entitled Straight Outta Vegas. 11 p.m. Pacific. It's syndicated on 360 stations. I get to talk to about 1 million people. And what we try to be is a keen observer, tell stories, and share information that people can avail themselves of, and try to make it as eclectic as we can. What's interesting is I did reach out to you because I've seen your work through LinkedIn, and we talked about DJ Allen, who's a friend of mine. I've known him for years, as well as his partner, Jay Shipp. And when you use the word creativity, it really gets my attention, because in the world I'm in, which is the world of communication, that's my college degree, communications, public relations, emphasis in journalism. I believe communication solves everything. So the more creatively we can package and repackage our message so that it resonates, I think then you have a situation where problems do get solved.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that especially now, I love the idea that you're a sports guy too, because I think that sports is such an important way to look at this thing too. I mean, there's so much we could learn from sports. I mean, talking to DJ, for so many years, he uses that metaphor a lot in a lot of what he does, is using sports as a metaphor for all sorts of different things. And so let's talk a little bit about your history. What got you into doing this? What got you started in looking at communications, or made you interested in it?
Well, I think in terms of as my college major, I started out as a psychology major, and then I realized what would I do with that when I was done, and then I switched to business, and that bored me. But communication, I could always write, even as a young kid, so I gravitated to that. And I was playing baseball, and when I got done with college, I didn't have the development of the awareness or consciousness to know that I'd want to do something like this, be in radio or be in the media. And so I went to work in the corporate world. But in much the same way, Rodney Dangerfield told funny stories as an aluminum siding salesman. I did the same thing in sports, always holding court. I was just a huge sports fan. And I think part of the thing is that for me, and going back to what DJ talks about, sports are not only a metaphor for life, they teach great life lessons. And I think the things that work on the field to lead to success work off the field in life. And the truth of the matter is, life is a team sport, right? I actually have a TED Talk entitled "Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Little League," and I was the opening speaker at the showcase in June 10th, 2015 that DJ hosted. And the premise is simple, Alex, and that is, whatever success we aspire to have in life will be done within the framework of a team. No one does it by themselves, even the Lone Ranger at Tonto. So to that end, our mission, our goal in life is to be the best teammate we can be the most productive teammate, be the teammate we want to play with, be the teammate other people want to play with. And in my talk, I talk about 3 things that basically highlight what I think makes a good teammate. 1, the ability to deal with failure. 2, the ability to understand leadership, not only respect leadership, but exude leadership. And the 3rd thing is you're capable of doing more than you think you are. And so in my 18 minutes, I delve into those 3 areas and start with a true story that happened to me in Little League and stayed with me for life. And the situation is that these things apply, and it all started in the world of sports on the baseball field. And I see things in life as a competition, but I also see things in life as teamwork and the ability to communicate within a team, because we're on teams our entire life. Sports, business, work, the community, no matter what you do. You mentioned you've got a marketing firm. I'm sure you've got employees and associates you work with, and in a sense, you're all a team. And what you want to have happen is that the whole become greater than the sum of its parts, and you do that through communication and teamwork.
Well, don't you think that also in life we find sometimes that we're in situations where we're in a team, we don't get to pick, right? We're in a team with people that are diverse, that are different, that have different maybe values and different understandings of how to approach issues, but you're still a team, and you still need to work together and find ways to work together to reach a common goal. And, that's something that intrigues me, because for me, creativity has a lot to do with what you're talking about, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of others, supporting them in the areas where they're weak, and then also encouraging them in their strengths as well going forward. But it doesn't work unless everybody's playing the same game, right? Unless everybody's with that same attitude. You all need to have that kind of attitude. If only one person in the room has that goal and that understanding and that holistic way of looking at solutions, finding solutions, it's a really difficult haul, right?
Well, there's no question, and it's back to the communication. And what I mean by that is when you have conflict, creativity to me is also adaptability. And
Mhm.
so the more you can adapt to situations through creative communication, the better chance you get your story, your message across.
Mhm.
For me, it's always been storytelling. I've got a story for every occasion. I tell about 9 stories in 18 minutes in my TED Talk. And so rather than just drop a subject matter in a feature dump, I'll tell a story. And
Yeah.
for instance, I'll give you a sample of one of my stories. One of the things I talk about in a teamwork environment, what I learned in Little League, is that as a member of a team, you can exude leadership from any level. And leadership is nothing more than understanding the needs of your teammates and being prepared to help deliver that. Leadership is influence based on you've earned because of the way you conducted your affairs with other people. Now, you don't have to be the team captain or the manager or the coach or the El Jefe to do that. You can be at any level of the organization. And the truth of the matter is, if you want to rise in an organization through your creative hard work, exude leadership in ways that don't necessarily aren't necessarily that complex. I'll give you some examples. If the trash can's full, you empty it. If the phone's ringing off the hook, you answer it. If you find out one of your coworkers is trying to gain access to an organization where you have a connection, hook them up, help them out. When you have proven to your team that you can handle the little things, you'll be called on to do the big things. And that day will come. You'll have to make a command decision in the heat of battle to help your team. Example, story. So the Pope, it turns out, was supposed to speak in New York City many, many years ago, and through some snafu, no one was there to pick him up at the airport when he flew into JFK. So he
I did not hear
realized,
this.
huh?
That's great. That's hilarious. But go ahead. Sorry to laugh so hard at that. That's just funny.
The story may be apocryphal, but you're gonna. I think you'll see the point.
Yeah.
It's to do with leadership and making command decisions in the heat of action.
Sure.
So he gets off the plane and he hustles down to the taxi cab stand and he goes up to a limo driver and says, "I need to be at the United Nations in 20 minutes. I need you to run every red light. I need you to go 80 miles an hour. I need you to weave in and out of traffic. Do whatever you got to do."
Yeah.
And the driver says, "I'm sorry, sir, I cannot do that. I've only been in this country 30 days. I've only had my license 1 week." Pope says, "Fine, you getting back, I'll drive." Pope's going 80 miles an hour down Broadway, heading toward the World Trade Center, and he's all of a sudden pulled over by one of New York's finest. And the officer approaches the vehicle and says, "Can I see your license?" "Oh my goodness!" He radios back. He goes, "I need a 247. I need an escort. We got a very important person here." And the dispatcher says, "Who is it?" He says, "I don't know who it is." He goes, "Well, is it the governor?" "No, more important than that." Is it the mayor?" "No, more important than that." He says, "Was it Derek Jeter?" "No, it's even more important than that." He goes, "Well, who is it?" He goes, "I don't know who it is, but whoever it is, the Pope is his chauffeur." Moral of the story.
Yeah.
Your day will come when you have to make a decision in the heat of battle. Or you may have to lead someone to a decision. My belief is, Alex, you talk about creativity, tell a story. Show me a fact and I'll learn it. Give me the truth, I'll believe it. But share a great story and it lives in my heart the rest of my life.
Yeah, no question. Stories are the best way to solidify somebody's idea. I love metaphor. I love using metaphor. And we know what's interesting is when you have confidence in your creative ability, and I know you've had this happen before. It kind of falls into what you were saying when you're talking about if there's a trash can that's full, you empty it. We are given so many opportunities in life to act and to be a leader or be someone who's working towards something creative. And I think the idea is it always has to be a big thing. Unless I'm moving people, unless I'm really kind of coming up with something that's life-changing, is it worth doing? When something like emptying the trash can is a gesture that actually people appreciate. When I was working retail, when I was a young man, and I know before I had gray hair, I was an assistant manager that they would use to take into struggling stores and kind of clean house. I would show up and I'd redo their books on how they're handling it. I'd handle bad employees and I'd help the manager out because they were struggling. And I was the guy they used that would send me to different stores to do this. And I found out early on, nobody likes me, because I would show up and I'm the troubled guy, the guy that came in with the guns blazing, throwing out orders, and they didn't have any idea who I was. So it was hard to get buy-in. So I learned very, very early on that the first thing I would do when I show up is I'd go to their bathroom and I'd clean it from top to bottom, because that's their private space. That's their thing. A clean bathroom is huge when you're especially working in a store where like 20 people are using the same bathroom. I would get a little picture. I put a plant in there. It would smell fantastic. And I would scrub the toilet and they would see this guy come in and do this. After I did that, I had a ton of buy-in, because they were like, if this guy is willing to clean our toilet, then maybe he's got something to share, or he's got something to do. Worked every single time. I started doing every single time I'd go into a store. First thing I would do is I'd clean the toilets. And you're so right about that. I mean, I just shared a story too. See how I borrowed your
It
method.
works. Two takeaways. First of all, you humbled yourself to conduct an activity which is much needed, and you gave yourself some authenticity by doing that. You took action. And how many times, what if you'd come in and said, hey, I'll be here next week, I'm going to clean the bathroom, and needs cleaning, but you never did it. There's an old saying, the smallest deed will always outweigh the greatest intention.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always judged by our actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And think what you did. You made a play for a teammate. You made a play for the entire team. And one of the axioms of my talk, everything I needed to know I learned in Little League, was 100% of what you do in life is observed 100% of the time by somebody, usually a teammate. Life's a team sport. Find a way to make a play for a teammate, and no matter how simple it is. Part of it too is assisting other teammates. Maybe you walked in and someone was already cleaning the bathroom and you said, hey, let me help you out here. Find a teammate, find a chance to help a teammate make a play. And that was the third aspect. You're capable of doing more than you think you are. We realize that in a team environment, sometimes you just need a little push. Story. The University of Texas football team loved to go swimming in the Olympic-sized pool adjacent to the governor's after practice every day, against the wishes of the governor. He hated it. So one day he says, I'm going to fix these guys. So he puts a couple of alligators in the bottom of the pool, stands there, waits for practice to end. Practice ends. The whole team comes rushing up all hot and sweaty. They're ready to jump in that pool, and they see the two alligators. And the governor across the way with his arms folded very indignantly says, I didn't think so. I'll tell you what, even if you guys got the guts to jump in this end of the pool, swim to that end of the pool, you get my daughter's hand in marriage, 10 grand in cash, and a brand new Rolls Royce. Any takers? Nobody moves. He said, I didn't think so. He turns around, starts walking to his house, his back's to the pool, and he hears a splash. Some knucklehead is in the pool. He gets about a third of the way in. One alligator's got his elbow, the other's got his arm, starting to bleed a little bit. Gets about halfway in. The alligator's having his way with him pretty good. Gets all the way across the pool, half in shreds, bloody, hops out, walks over to the governor. Governor says, well, young man, you answered the challenge. You swam from this end of the pool to that end of the pool. He goes, you get my daughter's hand in marriage, 10 grand in cash, and a brand new Rolls Royce. Is there anything you'd like to say? He goes, yeah, I demand to know the name of the guy who pushed me in the pool. The moral of the story is you're capable of doing more than you think you are. Sometimes you need a little push, and sometimes that push can come from a teammate. You'd be amazed what you can do in a team environment.
Yeah, that's totally true. I'm kind of going back again to that thing though that makes us act, like in sports. Okay, in sports, when I talk to kids, I talk to some kids. Sometimes I do these every once in a while through the Chamber of Commerce. I was allowed to, with along with other business people, we'd go to high schools, and we get to talk to kids, and they get to ask us questions about our careers and stuff. And there's some kids that want to be athletes, and there's some kids that want to do this kind of. And I talk from the position of the importance of creativity in anything that you do. And they'd say, well, it's not important to me. I want to be an athlete. And I'd say, well, that's the perfect thing. Athletes have to be creative. All they do is problem solve in a split second. They have to act on something. And that takes a lot of exercise of your mind as well as your body to be an athlete. Your mind has to be just as swift as your legs and your hands have to be.
Absolutely.
And that swiftness of your mind, I mean, it's exercise just like anything else. And I think that the things you're talking about, those actions and making those plays for a teammate and all these things are little, like they're laps around, that your mind's making that helps it become a little swifter as well. I think to me, that's just a very important thing, is to be actively aware that our actions are connected to our creative process and our problem solving, and that our intellect is constantly being challenged. And we don't have this awareness. We take it for granted. And if we find better solutions, or we find better ways to communicate, or we actually show interest in areas that we're curious about. That's the other thing. People could be curious about something for like 40, 50 years of their life and never delved into it and never researched it. And what a waste of time. You could have, like it was like in the old days when I was a kid, if I was anything I was curious about, I'd go into the library. I mean, now kids Google it, and I would learn about it. Pirates. Man, I would just read about pirates. The mob. There was a thing I was interested in the mob. I went over and grabbed books, and it was this natural curiosity that you all have. You have to have as a young person. You have to have that curiosity, because that's how we grow. But along the lines, as you grow, it seems to fade a little bit, right? So, and are you that? You're probably a very curious person. You kind of have to be with what you do, right? I mean, you have to always be
that intellectual curiosity.
Right.
Even when I was young, I remember listening to George Carlin and famous comedians. Why do they entertain me and make me feel so good? Well, you start with their words. William F. Buckley said, words are the tools of thought. So you get your thoughts out through your mouth and your words. But then how do we package those in a way that resonate? And how do we package those in a way that people find entertaining and creative and humorous? Humor is a big part of creativity, in my opinion. Not everybody can be a comedian, but everybody can be funnier. It's an art form that can be learned, and everybody likes humor. It makes the world go round. And this is not just art; it's science, Alex. Because when someone hears a story that touches them, there's an endorphin that's released in your brain called oxytocin, and it creates Sanskrit. Okay, I'll give you an example. This may be an uncomfortable example, but years ago, when Ray Rice, the fullback for the Baltimore Ravens, was arrested because he assaulted his girlfriend in an elevator. That report came out, and it was considered pretty egregious, right? Then a few weeks later, the video came out. And when people saw the video, it put everything in a far more different light, because it inspired emotion, negative emotion, but it inspired emotion, which released that oxytocin. And someone said, oh my God, and all of a sudden now, that's the kind of emotion you can inspire with words and creativity. And it can be done, and it can be learned. And here's how powerful it is. Years ago, Willie Nelson, as you may know, got into serious trouble with the IRS. And he owed about $32 million. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, of course. What was interesting is, in the process, while the IRS was seizing his properties and assets, and he was going to make good on everything, and he did, he was adamant about wanting to keep his golf course, because he lived in a beautiful house with a golf course adjacent to it, and the 18th green came up near his deck. And he was really adamant about keeping the golf course. And the IRS agent says, Willie, what's the big deal about this golf course? And he said, the beauty of owning your own golf course is that you get to decide par. He goes, you see that finishing hole there, that 18th hole? It's the par 14. And yesterday I birdied it. And he got to keep the golf course.
That's great. That's great. I love it. It's like you got a story for everything, don't you?
I do. And it's Tip O'Neill once said, if they have the added value of being true, that's even better. But people relate to them. I really believe they do, as opposed to, if you've got a family and you ever had to, lead your kids down the right road, as opposed to getting up and giving a PowerPoint presentation with graphs. Tell them a story, share, because a lot of very successful people in life have very interesting stories, right? So they relate to that. And I think it's something that sinks in and can be called upon later because of the emotion that it can inspire.
There's things too. Another thing that's kind of interesting is there's something that you often see on the internet is where people share things that inspire them, right? They share things that inspire them all the time, quotes or videos or whatever. And I always wonder, well, being inspired is important, and sharing what inspires you is good too, but it's not equivalent to an accomplishment. If you were inspired, then do something and share
Right.
the act that you did. Talk about it or share what the act is. Because I think sharing is incredibly important. I know it annoys some people, and some people think it's narcissistic to always be talking about the things you're doing and stuff. But everything I've learned and every time I've been inspired by someone, it's because they took the time to communicate with me in some way, or they took the time to share something with me, or share a story, or share an idea. And I think that now sharing is so incredibly important. And this idea of communicating and building teams through communicating with each other, I don't know if it's, in my lifetime has ever been even more important than now. I mean, right now, everybody is, right now it's almost biblical. We're all separated in a time when we all need to be more united. In a time when we need to come closer together, we're forced apart. So we need to be creative about how we do it. We have to be creative about how we communicate. We need to be more eloquent. We have to be more, more share the things that there's commonality between us. People that hate each other right now, that are in this country, that there's people that hate each other, and they don't even know each other. But I guarantee you, there are more things they have in common than
Absolutely.
Things, right?
And I completely agree. And too much of our communication has been relegated to texting and emailing and instant messaging and through Twitter and Facebook. And the only reason I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Twitter because I want to build my brand, but I'm not even on Facebook. If I want to talk to somebody, I'll pick up the phone and call them. It works. I'll
Phones
go
work?
visit. They really do work. And when two people talk and two people exchange information,
Mm-hmm.
That's when you make real progress. And you talked about sharing, and I encourage anybody, if you want information, go to a person who's already doing it and ask them to share. People love to be experts. Be inquisitive. Ask questions. Usually somebody helped them along the way, and they're eager to pass it along. And I have folks come to me. I'll get a request from somebody who does a high school radio show in Michigan and say, would you come on my podcast? I'm happy to, right? Joe Montana used to look in the mirror and still see the skinny freshman who couldn't get a date to the prom. He doesn't necessarily see the Super Bowl champion. We see the finished product. Well, how do you get to be the finished product? You acquire information. You get people. You seek out people who've been where you're trying to go and ask them to share their story, and they will. And it's important that we never stop being inquisitive and gaining that intellectual curiosity and asking questions. 5-year-old boy's walking down the beach with his father, and he says, "Hey, Dad, can I ask you a question?" He says, "Sure, son. What do you want?" He says, "How many stars in the sky?" He goes, "Boy, that's a good question. I wish I knew the answer to that, but that's a good question." They walk a few more feet. He goes, "Dad, can I ask you another question?" He goes, "Sure. How many fish in the sea?" He says, "Boy, that's another good question. I just don't know, but that's a good question." And he says, "Okay." He goes down another 50 feet, and he says, "Dad, how many grains of sand on the beach?" He goes, "Boy, you really ask good questions. I just don't know the answer." He goes, "Well, Dad, I hope you don't get mad. I keep asking all these questions." He goes, "Heck no, son. How are you going to learn anything if you don't ask questions?" Don't stop asking questions
Yeah.
about it,
The
right?
curiosity is so important. And we get so cynical as you get older. It's one of the things that the first thing we learn as we get older is cynicism, right? Is where because we've either failed a lot at something, or we've been disappointed, by so many things, because that's just happens with time, and people let you down, and you draw broad strokes across the board about people, like, well, I got let down so many times and everything, or relationships, You know, I
Sure.
went, you know, and all these kinds of things, these all become problems, and we don't look at things with fresh eyes, which is so important. Is we live with this cynicism, and it
And let's
spoils
unpack that.
everything.
That
Sorry?
that's a great subject matter because people become jaded, people become angry, and then fear takes over.
Hmm.
And fear is nothing more than holding mental pictures of what you don't want to happen.
Right.
So you don't apply for that job because you're cynical because the last one didn't work out, or you can't get a call back, or whatever the case may be in life. You don't pursue what you want because you become cynical. And then how do we creatively unpack that? You study people who were successful. Like there was a pitcher in Major League Baseball who lost more games than anybody else in history, but he didn't let that stop him. He kept making plays for teammates, and now they got an award named after him. His name is Cy Young. Cy Young lost more, but there was a basketball player that missed more shots than anybody in his career in the time he played, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And he had kind of a sad situation last year, but a guy by the name of Kobe Bryant won 5 championships. He
Yeah.
kept taking his shots. He didn't let that stop him. You know, Henry Ford filed bankruptcy 3 times before the Model T hit the road. Walt Disney was told by his first 2 jobs, his newspapers, they had to fire him because he had, quote, no creativity.
Yeah.
Colonel Sanders had 1,000 objections before he got one chicken place to try his recipe. Oh, by the way, there was a guy by the name of Fred Smith. He wrote a term paper in college. He had a dream about a company he would start that would deliver mail overnight. And the teacher said, well, that's kind of a dumb idea. I don't think it'll work, and gave him a C minus. You may have heard of Federal Express. That was Fred Smith. So there isn't a human being that hasn't experienced failure, setback, rejection, which is basically temporary if you allow it to be.
Right.
But you're right. If you allow that cynicism to take root, you're not allowing what God, the creativity God gave you, to fight around that. And there are examples, I'm sharing examples of people who've been where you want to go, and they didn't, you know, it wasn't a rosy path for them either. I know of no one who had great success in life that didn't experience tremendous failure. Thomas Edison said, you know, when he tried to invent the light bulb, he said, you know, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I just figured out 1,000 ways it wouldn't work. So how you process what happens to you can determine in your creative mind whether you're cynical or whether you see, you know, the Chinese have a proverb: you can light a candle or curse the darkness. It's all back to your creative mindset, Alex, and how we approach things in life with a creative prism.
Right. I have a Halloween display I have outside that I create for the last 5 years, where it's an animatronic robotic thing where it's like moving characters and stuff. And I build it out of garbage out of my garage. So I don't buy anything. I buy the motors, but that's it. And then I figure out how to make them work. Well, you know, they break down like almost all the time. And it never makes me mad. My neighbors actually comment on the fact that it never makes me mad every time they see me fixing it, because I'm thinking, well, after I'm done fixing it, it's way better than it was the first time. Each solution, each way of fixing it, I make everything stronger, everything better materials. And then eventually it stops breaking down because you've just evolved so much, you know. And these little successes, you know, it's just like when I used to coach soccer for little league soccer.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd always tell the girls is, my daughter was on the team. I tell her, your job isn't to make a goal. Your job is to win the ball. If everybody was just winning the ball, guess what happens? You get the goal. And that's all everybody has to do.
That's really great coaching, because
Yeah.
success, that's right out of, in all seriousness, that's right out of the Nick Saban, Bill Belichick playbook. Success is a process-oriented endeavor. You've
Right.
got to commit to the process, and whatever that process may be that leads you to success. A win is a result of doing things right over 2 or 3 hours.
Right. And you see it all the time in sports. When a good play, a bunch of players walk up to the guy who did the play and they high five him. Good job. Now, he didn't score, but it was a good play. And you reinforce that. You know, you need more of that. Everybody needs that. And every time a team's doing poorly or doing badly, all he needs is one hero. You need one guy to make a great play.
Right.
And then everybody wants to back him. And I love that idea. I love that idea. I know it's that's why I think sports is so important. And I think it's also, it's just a fantastic, if we looked at it further than just an entertainment thing, we actually looked at it as life lessons and the importance
Sure.
I think that we would learn a lot, so much from it. I mean, from just the act of doing it. Your favorite teams and why they're your favorite teams and what you love and how inspired people feel watching sports. You know.
If you look across corporate America, you'll find executives at the highest levels almost exclusively were competitive athletes at some point in their life, maybe even if just high school. But because they learn those rudiments, discipline, fundamentals, giving your best effort, even though there are no guarantees, conflict resolution, the willingness to work hard, the willingness to deal with setback, rejection, defeat, and not allow it to affect you and to keep moving forward. These are all rudiments that make everybody successful, and they transfer over into the game of life. The truth of the matter is, sports are a fabulous metaphor for the game of life, and you can learn a lot from them.
Right. And employers need to also look at their team that way too. It's important for not to take advantage of people, or you need to motivate people. And it's like the old saying. I know it's not a sports one, but uh, how do you get a bunch of people to build a boat? I don't know. You've heard this one probably. You don't just hand them hammers and nails and wood. You have them long for the open sea. You know that
That's awesome.
you know you
That's
yeah.
Yes, I had not heard that, but you're onto something strong.
Right. If you can
Because-
motivate your people to understand the reason for the boat and the purpose of the boat and what you can get from the boat, then they'll want to build it themselves. They will go and get they will go and get the hammers. It's just handing people things and telling them how to do it is not going to get you anywhere. We need to start speaking broader and bigger again, especially now. I think
and
that we need that from
you're
leaders.
you're doing what you do because you have a passion for it. You like it. When you get out of bed in the morning, it's a labor of love, and you're doing it because it it's not. There are people's jobs fall into two categories. It can either be a life support system or the vehicle to take them to where they will be in life. You're in that vehicle, and we all know what that vehicle is. But back to your fear and cynicism, they don't want to go do what they love because they're not sure if they'll be able to make a living at it, and they're not sure if they'll be wrong. Do it. Follow that passion. It sounds very cliche, but it's not, because the truth of the matter is that story you just told is powerful. I heard a slightly different version of it, and that was a newspaper editor called one of his field reporters into the office and said, "I need you to go downtown Los Angeles. They're building some sort of structure. I need you to find out what it was." So we found 3 people on the job site, and he sees the first guy laying bricks, and he says, "May I ask what you're doing here?" He goes, "Buddy, can't you see I'm laying bricks? It's a hot sun. I'm laying bricks." He goes, "What are they building here? Can you tell me that?" He goes, "I don't know, some kind of church or something." He says, "Okay." So he goes to the second guy and he says, "Can I ask what this is going to be?" He says, "Buddy, I'm kind of busy laying these bricks here, but I hear it's going to be a pretty nice church. That best of my knowledge." He goes to the third guy and says, "Can I ask what you're doing here?" And he says, "Oh, absolutely." He goes, "When we're done with this building, it'll be one of the most beautiful buildings in the history of Los Angeles. It's going to be one of the nicest churches anybody's ever seen. Families will worship here. Fathers will marry off their daughters here. Babies will be baptized here. Family memories will be created here. When we're done, this will be one of the most historic projects in the history of Los Angeles. Which one do you want to be when you show up to work? If you're the third one, you're going to have a very fulfilled life."
Yeah, it's so true that just we need to just find that switch and just really look at the bigger picture. If for nothing else, it's for our kids,
Sure.
for nothing else. I always kind of tell people, young people I talk to who just had their first kid, I usually talk to the dudes and I go, when that kid's born, the entire world's going to change for you. Every priority you have is going to change, and suddenly you're less important in the planet now. What's more important is that little one. I mean, the work you're doing is important, actually more important in a lot of ways, but everything changes. Everything is so different. And and that's kind of what I always kind of think too is watching the growth and the amazement in the eyes of kids, just how they approach things is should you look at it as a reminder on how we should see things and approach things.
100%. You're spot on. Children at least up to the 5 or 6 look at the world with great wonderment.
Mhm.
But to your point earlier, that cynicism can creep in, but it's learned. It's almost all learned. A
Right.
baby is only born with 2 things, Alex: fear of falling and fear of loud noises. Everything else is learned. Everything else has to be learned.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I
So,
always thought, I heard a third thing. It was great on this. I like the podcast Radio Lab, and I listen to it all the time. It talks about science and stuff. And I heard somebody, I think on that show, was saying that, you know, when a baby grabs the baby bottle and throws it on the floor, and then you pick it up, put it up on the thing, and they grab it again, they throw it on the floor, and you pick it up, you put it back, and you're being frustrated because you think they're just being a pain in the butt. What they're doing is they're being scientists. They're thinking, oh, if I throw this, it goes and falls, right? Every time I drop it, it falls. And then the big person picks it up. Isn't that interesting? So they're doing an experiment watching how the big person, and it's just them processing through their lives, you know, learning and growing and learning. And if you look at that, you could look at that like, oh, that little shit's a pain in the ass. Or you could say, this kid is starting to learn and grow. You know, there's different ways of looking at things. And I think that sometimes people are a little too small in how they see things. Things are always a little more complicated than you imagine. You should people should just assume that your first opinion of something is likely wrong. The first gut instinct you have about the reason for something is wrong. And it kind of goes back to, because I'm just as frustrated and agitated as anybody else about what's going on in the world with everything. But I also know that at the end of the day, we all have to live together. We all have to, all these people that annoy you and anger you, they're not just going to up and disappear. They're going to be there for a long time. And we got to figure out how to make this work. We got to figure out how to work together. So when are we going to start? I mean, we got to start sometime. We got to start working on this sometime. And that's just my question sometimes is that I give myself is like, you know, what am I going to do today to try to mend that thing or try to make the place a little bit better? It's a hard question right now.
You covered a lot of good ground there. And I talk about intellectual curiosity, which I have. I'm pretty sure that story you share is authentic, and it's from, I'm talking about the baby throwing the bottle gun. I'm pretty sure it's from Bill Cosby's book, Fatherhood, which came out in 1986, which is a very good book.
Oh, maybe that's where I got it.
Well, no, but I think that's great, okay, because I've been an avid book reader since '84. I haven't read as many lately, but all this, you know, Thomas Peters and Lee Iacocca, and I always wanted to know how the sharp people were thinking. And Bill Cosby in that book talks about how communicating with your kids, and just to step back, in the world we're in right now, people aren't communicating. They're talking at each other. No one wants to validate the other side. No one wants to listen to the other side. No one wants to understand what are the factors you considered in coming to this conclusion. And I remember, my oldest son was born in May of '86. I think that's when the book came out. And I read it right away because he'd raised 4 or 5 kids and they're all doing pretty well. And the bottom line is the creativity with which Cosby used to communicate with his family was ingenious. Mm-hmm. The first time he caught his son lying, he caught his son in a bull-faced lie, and he took him out back. And he said, son, you don't understand how painful it is when you lie to somebody and how painful it is when you lie to your parents. Do you really understand? He goes, I do, Dad. Are you going to lie anymore? He goes, no, I'm not. He goes, good. He goes, I was going to hit you, but I'm not going to hit you because I think you're telling the truth. You're not going to lie anymore, right? He goes, no, I'm not. And the kid turns around and Cosby whacks him off the back of the head. These are different times. And the kid turns around, Dad, I thought you said you weren't going to hit me. He goes, I lied. How did that feel that I lied to you? And it resonated. But I like it. Again, we've come full circle now, and why I saw you on LinkedIn, and I think your premise is great. How can we break down those 4 walls and start communicating? Maybe it starts with a creative story, and just start one at a time. Mm-hmm. One at a time. It's not, the world didn't get this way that it is right now overnight, and it's not going to flip back overnight. But one at a time in our own individual encounters, at work, at school, in business, in the community, on your sports teams, how you communicate creatively with the other person's feelings in mind can change the world one person at a time.
Right. But, and to bring it back to the sports analogy also, but this doesn't work unless, I mean, if you have a baseball team on one end of the field and a football team on the other end of the field, you're not getting anywhere. You need to, everybody needs to be playing the same game. You know, everybody needs to be on the same page. You can't just have one side hoping and working and struggling and being open-minded and have the other side closed-minded and opinionated. You know, I think that's the difficult side of this, is that there's this immaturity in this. I mean, everybody needs to just grow up. I mean, you know, honestly, right now, we've kind of become infantile in the way that we approach things. I mean, the grown-up is responsible to protect the young people and guide them along the way, and, you know, push them a little bit towards danger, but be there to protect them. You know, just like when you teach your kids to swim, you know,
Right.
you put them in a dangerous situation, but you're there. You're standing there waiting for making sure that you can save them. And that's where they learn their courage, right?
Right.
Right now, kids are watching us, and we're creating a dangerous situation.
Yes.
And we're responsible for that. We're responsible for them, and we're responsible for the way that they are observing the way that we are working together. They are, and I think that's really an important thing that we need to consider and to work towards. And that's why I talk to people like you, and that's why I try to talk to creatives, because I do honestly value conversation, and I value hearing people's perspective. And everything I know, everything I've learned came from other people. Everything that it came from people good enough to share with me, or smart enough to just write a book or share or put out information. And then just absorbing and being aware that you're absorbing, being aware that you're taking it in, and not being arrogant enough to think that I have all the answers, because you don't, and nobody does, right?
No.
So anyway, so I think it's important for people to, and we're going to have all your information, your website and everything up here when this is shared in your link. And I think that people should go listen to your TED Talk and learn a lot about what it is you're trying to do. Listen to some of your great stories, and maybe pick up some knowledge that I think everybody kind of needs moving forward. Do you want to leave any, I hate having the last word on these things. Do you want to leave any parting words I always think of the people watching and younger people watching.
Yeah.
Do you have any parting words you might want to give?
Well, I think you covered a lot of really good ground, and just to put a capper about communication and people.
Well, we
in
covered good ground.
In 6,000 years, human nature really hasn't changed that much. We're not as complex as we think we are. We're more simple than complex. We all want the same things in life, pretty much. Basically, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The question is, how do we get there? In the meantime, while we're figuring out these world problems, I'll leave you with this thought. Tune into my show Saturday night at 11 p.m. Fox Sports Radio, Sirius XM Channel 83. And, you know, Groucho Marx once said, man does not live by bread alone. Once in a while, he craves a cookie. So Saturday nights, we'll entertain you, and we'll have a few laughs and talk about sports stories and betting stories and the things you want to know about. And then it's podcasted immediately right on the Fox Sports Radio website. And I actually posted my most recent show on my LinkedIn page. So I appreciate you having me. I think we're kindred spirits in that we understand that human beings are capable of great things when we tap into our creativity.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.